Alright guys, sorry we didn't check in when we got on the bus. We're getting through the city here, and actually we just got to Moosehead Brewery, so we're doing a brewery tour as an excursion, and so far a lot of fun. So let's go check this out.
Waivers as you guys come in.
Sure.
So it's for the two of you there.
Morning.
Everybody a pair of safety glasses. Just so you know, you do not have to put these on right away. I'll let you know when you do need to. And for the people with glasses, I'll try to accommodate you with a bigger pair that will fit over your actual glasses.
Everybody has this too.
Glasses as well as a pair of earplugs.
Yep.
Yes. Yes? Okay. As mentioned, you do not need to throw these in right now. I'll let you know when you do. So before we start, I'll introduce myself. My name is Will. So I'm a tour guide here for Moosehead, but I also work down at the small batch, which will be where we end the tour. This here is Moosehead Breweries, the only Moosehead Breweries. So anything you see with the Moosehead name on it has come from here. We purchased this brewery in 1928 off James Ready Brewery, and it wasn't until 1947 that we actually switched the name to Moosehead Breweries. So in that gap of time between 1928 and 1947, we were known as New Brunswick Breweries. We also kept the James Ready brand within our company. So if you guys are familiar with James Ready beer at all, that's something we still make, and it's still one of the names we release under. This past summer, we actually released a new line of products under that name, and we did a line of seltzers. So there's 6% seltzers, and it just keeps things unique. So we have the Moosehead name, we have Small Batch, which is kind of into the craft beer scene, and then we have Hop City, which is also a microbrewery that we have out of Brampton, Ontario, and then James Ready. So we've got a whole slew of things, which is nice, so we don't really have to throw the Moosehead name on everything. So where we're at right now, this is referred to as the executive suite. So this is the first part of the office portion that you'll get to see, and this is the offices of all the executives from Moosehead. So that first door that was open with the woman there, that's Derek Olin's office, so he's the former president of the company. The second office after that, that would be Andrew Oland, who is the CEO and president of the company currently, as well as this is beyond this wall, is his brother's office, Patrick. So you can think of this as like the upstairs of their house, which is pretty unique because we are an independent brewery. We are family owned, and also the largest independent brewery in Canada. So even though we are an incredibly large brewery and we do a ton of product, we have a very microbrewery feel to us. For that reason that we're still family owned and kind of a tight-knit group. A lot of people that work here are from St. John, as well as like their fathers have worked here, their grandfathers have worked here. So it's a really cool like vibe is the easiest way to put it throughout the entire factory as well as the offices, because we're all locals. So it's locally run, family owned, like locally owned as well. So it's really cool for something like St. John to have this. So the area that we're in right now, we're outside the main lab, as you can hear them all discussing, like the chit chat. But so in this lab, we test all the different ingredients as well as the products that we're going to be using while making the beer, as well as in the finished goods. So kind of on the topic of kind of raw materials, our grain, our water, things like that are tested in here, as well as they take the finished product and test things like the alcohol percentage, the yeast that's in it, as well as different things that contain to the beer, like such as the SRM, and then as well as the different aromas. So that comes into big play when we're making our descriptions to the beer and things like that. We want very accurate descriptions, as well as SRM is a big thing when it comes to craft beer. If any of you guys are craft beer people. So SRM, this is something I actually learned a couple tours ago, because somebody said, what's SRM? And I was like, oh, I don't know. I always talk about it, but I don't know. So it's just a standard reference method, but that standard reference method is used towards the color of the beer. So each beer fits on a color scale where kind of how dark or how light it is. The aroma is basically what you're getting from the beer. The alcohol percentage, that's something we have to be extremely careful about, because we have to accurately represent that. That's not something that we can just guess. If we started misrepresenting that, we'd probably find ourselves in a courtroom pretty fast. So that's tested in all the different beers that we do. Our yeast that we use is very unique. You can think of it as in like movies when you get like they have the family yeast in a big jar for the bread. You can think of that like our beer, because we reuse the same strains of yeast and we've been using the same family of yeast for years upon years. The water that we use in our beer is completely different than the water than all the houses around here. So all the houses around here are on a big well, including mine, and that water is extremely hard. There's a lot of calcium in that water. So we still get our water from Spruce Lake in order to have basically the purest water we can have. But there is a lot of things they still have to do in order to kind of filter out that water and have it as best as they can when they are making beer. Because basically any poor product can be recognized in beer by the trained kind of taste and everything. So any ingredients that we are using, we want them to be top notch, therefore they are all tested. Big question that comes into play here is what happens if something doesn't pass the test? Just don't use it. Basically, your reputation is everything when it comes to this kind of business, as well as any kind of business. So basically, why use something if it's going to potentially jeopardize that? So basically in this room, as you can see, this is where the taps are, so this is where we're going to do some sampling. You guys actually get a really cool tour. Not tour, this portion of things is a bit more unique than otherwise it would be, because usually I just get to explain this portion and not actually pour off it, but we'll be pouring off it today. So this one is a mix of one of our small batch pale ales, as well as a German black lager. So this one's going to be really nice in flavor. This typically comes with a darker beer, and that's for a specific reason that I'll get into in a couple minutes. Some of the other things in this room, so we've got that door has got a story. Weirdly enough, it's just a door, but does. As well as the syrup room comes into play a lot, especially I'll talk about it when it comes to our rather, because we add syrups in our beer in order to enhance that sweetness and flavors. So there's 4 other beer that we're going to try, 2 being small batch beers. So these beers are unique to New Brunswick only, as well as we have our Moosehead Rather, which is our original Rather, and then Moosehead Lager. And just so you guys do know, the way this will work when we move on to the next beers is you guys will come up, I will give your glass a rinse, and then I'll pour the next beer. I wouldn't need you, don't worry. Yeah.
Smells really good.
So just before I get into the explanation, I will tell you what each beer is when we come up to it. If it's a beer for some odd reason, whether it be an allergy or something you feel you cannot have, or something you won't enjoy, just when I take your glass, if you want one of the other beers we've already had, we can do that as well. So this here is our original Radler. This is a 4% Radler. This is an 80-20 mix. What I mean by that, this is 80% lager, 20% juices and syrups. Radlers tend to be about 80-85% lager, 15 to 20% juices and syrups. So this one here is the Radler we've been making for years and years. This is the only Radler we make year round. So usually we do a flavor or 2 new flavors a summer. Our different Radlers, they're kind of all in the same kind of sweetness range, and they're all 4%. We sell a ton of these beer. When we first made this beer, we did a really great job promoting it, at least in New Brunswick. That's what I'm familiar with, so that's kind of what I have to go off of. And we did a gin and Radler deal. So if you went to the liquor store and you purchased a box of this Radler, you received a bottle of Bombay gin with it. The idea there is to add a shot of gin to your Radler. Turns out to be a pretty fun Saturday. But if you ever hear somebody talk about a Rad Dad, that's exactly what a Rad Dad is. That's something you can do with any of your types of Radlers that you do. Gin's a good mix, as well as you can take a lot of light beers and add them to Radler to kind of lighten them up. So Moosehead Lager is the first beer we actually took to the United States market, and that is the beer that is the reason why you guys are so familiar with it. Derek Olin, so the first office, the one that was open, that's his office door. When he got into a management position within the company, he felt like there was room to penetrate the U.S. market, but they also needed a beer to do so. So they did Moosehead Lager. The cool thing about this lager is, so when you guys pulled up, you passed the 9 big tanks out front, correct? Whether you look at them or not. In all of those tanks are lager, if they're all filled, and in each of those tanks is 1 million bottles of lager. So if we have all of those tanks filled, at any given time we have 9 million bottles of lager sell the most of this beer. So I'll give everybody a sample of this beer, and then I'll kind of get into the second portion of this story. Like I said, I'll keep the glasses full.
Alright guys, now it's getting good. The first sample. Ready for your first one?
Yeah, it's before noon.
It's before now. But it's an official tour, so I think we're allowed.
Yeah, it's part of it.
That we make. So we also make an Alpine lager, which some of you may or may not have seen before. Typically a lot of tourists tend to see this beer on tap as opposed to in cans. We get a lot of in cans. But the Alpine lager was actually the idea of P.W. Olin, who was a third generation Olin, and he went to Europe to study to be a brewmaster. When he went over there to study, the style of beer that they studied in this course was a traditional lager. At the time, the family was making a lot of darker beers, so this was kind of unique to him. Learned how to make this beer, it's kind of the process he learned, and when he was done this course, he came home to the family company and kind of wanted to show the family what he had learned. He wanted to show off, essentially. And when he proposed the idea to his father of making this style of beer, his father rejected it. His father told him no, because the idea of why fix something if it's not broken. Company was doing well with the beer they were making. So his father was actually going to Boston in the next couple weeks for a medical procedure, and behind his father's back, he actually made the beer. So typical father-son, just went behind dad's back, but in this sense, it's with an entire brewery. Anyway, so if you guys know about making beer, he was only gone about a week or so in the making. If he had it planned properly, he could make the beer really fast, but it was the fermentation process that takes the longest. But at that point, Dad wasn't going to pull the plug. So they stuck around with the beer, and it turned out to be very successful, and it's still one of the beer we make today. So we've got Moosehead Lager, the one you're drinking now. We have Alpine Lager, which is another 5% lager. We have Moose Light, which is a 4% lager. And then just in the last couple of years, we introduced the light calorie lager, which we refer to as Crack Canoe, which is 3.5%. Move on to the next two taps. Before I pour them, you recognize that these two taps have a small batch name on them. So small batch is where we're going to finish. I mentioned earlier in the lobby about small batch, but small batch is our microbrewery within the brewery. So this is where we kind of get to play around with different flavors without a lot of risk, essentially. We can try new flavors and put them on the wall. That's why we have a tap room, in order for the public to try before we kind of go and take a large risk with it and put them into large production. So the first beer here on the small batch taps is an East Coast IPA. This one here is 5.9%, and it's a hazy, fruity IPA. It's a really popular style. So this one here, if you guys do not enjoy IPAs, I encourage you to try this one, just because it is low in bitterness as well as low in hoppiness. So it's kind of a nice entry IPA. I also have a bit of my own story to it, so I'll tell you guys that once I get to it. So if you guys want to come up and try that, go for it. This is also where it comes into play of if you feel like this is a beer you will not enjoy, you can ask for it. Here on the small batch system, it ends up being about 250 to 300 liters of beer, which in the beer making world is a very small quantity of beer.
Yeah.
It's real good.
We make year round, so usually we do a flavor or two new flavors a summer. The way that works is we make a huge batch of it at once, and the craft beer drinkers, that is fairly low on the IBU scale. That's why they encourage you guys to kind of try this beer. When I first started here, this is where the story kind of goes my own way, I did not enjoy IPAs at all, because there's a flavor I really didn't like. I honestly wasn't big into beer. I kind of just drank Radler and just stuck with that. Working here has definitely opened up kind of my door to try new things, try different beers, because we always have different styles on tap, so I can kind of just try them, see if I like them. But with the IPA, the only way that I actually got into this style of beer is I actually had to drink an entire glass. And basically, I honestly did not enjoy that first glass, because it was a style I didn't enjoy, but kind of broke down that barrier and kind of got through it, and now it's like one of my favorite styles. So I encourage someone.
But I'm the same way. I used to hate IPAs. Like I was, and it's amazing how your tastes change the more
once you do it.
Try stuff and this and that.
So I worked at the bar last night, and there was a girl that came in and she ordered a bunch of different IPAs, and she kind of said she was along the same story, that she did not enjoy IPAs, and then she did a brewery tour with a bunch of her friends, and she didn't even like beer, but she went to 18 different breweries in one day, and all of a sudden she liked beer. So I like that part of things. So the next beer is a small batch pale ale. So if you guys have had our original pale ale, this one's a little bit higher percentage and a little bit hoppier, but this one's a nice light sipper. My best idea of this beer is it's really good pairing beer with a meal or something, because a lot of people find with an IPA or the Radler that it is too sweet, and then IPAs people find that they're drinking their meal at the same time as eating meals. So the pale ale is a really nice kind of light, but lots of flavor, but it's not like overwhelming. Yeah. I believe this is your glass.
Yep.
That it is slightly warmer, but when you are sipping this beer, I do encourage you to take that like the very long like smell of the beer and kind of like really take your time. Our modern beer, kind of our newer styles of beer, but the Olin's as well as Moosehead's first beer they ever made was Susanna's Brown Ale. So Susanna Olin was a stay-at-home housewife, and in her spare time she started making beer. She was making beer and they were selling it out of their back door within their community into jugs. So if you guys like fill growlers at home at all? So that's the idea of where a growler comes from. It's that jug of beer, because that's how they used to buy beer in the old days. So Susanna was making a lot of beer, selling it out of their back door, and it came to a certain point in time, they realized that all Susanna was doing was making beer. So her husband, John, kind of saw this as a business opportunity, and he paired up with two local businessmen from the Halifax area, and they purchased a microbrewery, and that's kind of how the whole Moosehead story started. They started with a microbrewery, and they moved from there and bought a couple different breweries. Yeah.
What year is this?
1867. Yeah, so it starts right around there. They lost a couple breweries due to fire, rebuilt. They've moved around a little bit. They've been the Halifax area, Turtle Grove, Nova Scotia, the Dartmouth area, which we still own the building that's in the Dartmouth area. We use it as another version of small batch, as well as the Uptown St. John area, and then they moved here, and this was their permanent home, hopefully forever, because for as long as I'm around, I'll be good with it right here. But yeah, so that's kind of how the whole Moosehead and the Olin's family started with the whole the brewing idea. So I'll move on to the cask system. So the cask system is a European style of pouring beer. So these taps here are hooked up to CO2 gas. That's what's kind of pressurizing the beer to pour. This one here is hooked up to no gas at all. So what's happening is when I'm pulling this arm down, it's allowing more air to push through, and that's what's pouring the beer. So when I do pour the beer off here, you guys will think I'm very bad at pouring beer because it comes off foamy, but then the beer oxidizes. This style is poured slightly warmer than you typically would be used to, but it is a nice flavor, and that's why we do a lot of darker beers off here, because you get a lot of nice, different flavor in a slightly warmer beer than you do a cold beer. It's not a warm beer. You'll just notice it's not as cold as some ones. So this one will take a little bit longer to pour, but like I mentioned upstairs, this is a mix of the small batch pale ale, which is the last beer you tried, and a black German lager. This part's also fun because I've never had this one, so I get to try this one with you guys. You'll see it's going to come up to right about there.
Oh, okay.
So the beer is oxidizing. You'll feel in your glass, I believe this is your glass, that it is slightly warmer. But when you are sipping this beer, I do encourage you to take that like the very long like smell of the beer and kind of like really take your time. Our time, you need a full time. So you'll see
That's
the
pretty
little
neat,
display
guys.
we actually just recently put up.
You learn something new every day.
Small batch. So you get this kind of something you can do. If you guys are big dark beer people, serve like take two out of the fridge, put one on the counter, drink one cold, and then have the next one just slightly warmer. And you'll notice the flavors are a little bit different. You actually get more flavor out of a slightly warmer beer. Yeah. So this here in this room, this is the portion we're going to keep our eyes on. So what's going to be behind me, that there is referred to as a whirlpool system. It is essentially just a large heat exchanger. It was created by a former brewmaster here at Moosehead named Henry Hudson, and So the idea here is when you make beer, at a certain point you end up boiling the beer, and in order to move on to the next step, you have to let the beer cool back down. So what happens here is it runs the hot beer past cold water, so they run past each other and allows the heat to exchange. It heats up that water while cooling down the beer. That water that's being heated up is the water that we actually use in the next batch of beer. So this is a more efficient way for us to do things on both ends, because we can move on to making more beer as well as starting some other beer. So that's why we can always just run, because we have systems like this that allow us to be more efficient in the way we do it. That's really all I have for this room. We'll move on into here. It's open if you guys want to take a peek in there. And I'll have a little spiel in here, and then we'll move out on to the next portion. So essentially, when making beer, you start out with grain. You then combine grain with water, and then you're allowing the water to take on the flavors from the grain. And it cools down through the last system, and then after that is when we can add yeast and different flavors and syrups. And then the next step after that, we go in the tanks, and that's where the beer would ferment. Fermentation is a very long process. So fermenting an ale can take about 4 weeks, a lager about 6. The more complex the beer, the longer it takes. Fermentation is by far the longest portion of making beer. We then will package the beer, and the last step would be pasteurization. Pasteurization is bringing the beer up to a certain temperature to allow it to have a shelf life. That's why when you go and buy any type of beer, it can be a couple months old in the liquor store and be perfectly fine. So we'll move on up into the next portion. The lauder ton is open. The only thing I'd say is probably turn on your flashlights if you have your phone, because that one's a little darker so you can see it. In this portion of the brewery, this is the actual production facilities. It's quite loud in there, and we are a large group, so I won't really be able to point out things as we go, so I'll tell you a lot of things about it now. And then walking through will basically just be a walkthrough, and then we'll talk again at the end. So in here, you're going to see the bottling line, you're going to see the can lines, you're going to see a lot of equipment and different things, the pasteurizers. So the bottling lines can run at 1,000 bottles per minute, can lines can run at 1,200 cans per minute. Any cans you see in here have come pre-printed from the US. All the bottles, we put the stickers on ourselves, well, with a piece of equipment. We're not like laying them out there yet. But our bottles, we reuse them up to 10 times. We have a piece of equipment that can clean the bottles, bring them up to their original level, as well as a piece of equipment that can take anything out of a bottle that you put into it. The only exception being if you fold up your bottle cap and put it in the bottle, they have to smash that bottle, whether it's the first use or the 9th use. So that doesn't allow us to reuse the bottles, because what the cap's doing is scratching the inside, so it's jeopardizing the structural integrity of the bottle. So like I mentioned, we'll walk through this portion. We'll walk through relatively quick, but we'll do a good talk at the end. You'll see different things where the can line's being filled, where you see all the cans bundled up, and then they're pushing through and being single file. That's where they fill, that's where they feed all of the can lines. So just like I said, 1,000 bottles per minute for the bottles, 1,200 for the cans. Okay. So they're actually not running the can line right now, but that there, that piece of equipment, that's where they feed the can. One thing with these stores, either they're running one line or they're not running the other, and some days you get lucky and they're running both, but they don't have to run all these lines at all times, so that's why it kind of works that way. We only run this actual factory 5 days a week, so it's very efficient, so we're kind of able to do things as we do. runaway dog down there.
Oh boy. Free beer.
So you guys can take off your chainsaws and you can get your earbuds and place your chainsaws here. So this portion here, this is where you guys are going to get to sample some unpasteurized product. That is, it's that product that has not gone through that final stage of going to a certain temperature for its shelf life. This is Moosehead lager that was taken off the lines this morning. That's the same lager that you're seeing run over there right now. So the difference here is people will notice a lot of difference in the crispness of the beer. That was kind of hard to crisp. Anyway, so I'll get everybody a sample of that. You guys can try that out. The idea here is this is the freshest Moosehead beer you will ever get to try. So small batch, like I said, 20 barrel system. They make all the beer. The unique beers that we'll put up.
Fresh off the line and what they're bottled now. So unpasteurized and
That's where
as
it's
fresh
small
as it
batch
gets.
beer made. So this is also where I'm going to give you a sticker because we've all been very good.
You can tell it's fresh. You can tell it's really good.
Yes.
Before we move on to the next part, this kind of is the final part. We're going to go in through that way, and at that point we'll be in the small batch bar. In there will be a take-home fridge for any product that you potentially want to buy. I don't know if you guys can buy stuff to take on the boat. I don't know how that works. Anyway.
You can. They'll just confiscate it and give it back to you the last morning.
Don't worry. And then the bar is also open if you guys have time for a drink, as well as there's some merchandise and things like that too. So I also want to say thank you guys for coming for the tour. Hope you've enjoyed your trip up to this point. I hope you also enjoy Halifax and then your days on the sea as well.
All right, guys, really interesting tour. That was a lot of fun.
That really was fun.
Beers were all really good. Even tried some stuff that I normally don't like, but smooth, good.
Very smooth.
Yeah. So we got about 15 minutes here or so to sample some more stuff and grab another beer before we head back to the ship. And I think we're just gonna go for a walk around town and check.
Such a gorgeous day.
Yeah, check out St. John. So let's have another beer.
Why not?